Is it God's house, the vision of God's house that I'm truly seeking to build? Or are there times and moments where it is my house that I am getting caught up in wanting to build, and my vision for my life, the things that I hope happen in my life, the things that I would love to happen? Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be sort of a little real-time Bible study encouragement based off of something I read in my quiet time this morning that really encouraged me personally, and it's on this idea of, are you working in vain? Are you laboring in vain? And this comes from a passage in Psalm 127 that I've loved for a long time, that I've gone back to and that God has reminded me of in different situations. And I was reminded of it again in something that I've kind of just been wrestling through recently. And so I want to share that with you. Side note / disclaimer, most of the time my sit down videos like this on kind of like topical things in the Bible, most of the time those are things I've been kind of sitting on for a while and thinking through for a while, and are a lot more organized and structured and planned out in terms of me filming the video. But this one, I'm kind of just rolling with it and going with it because this is something that again encouraged me real time this morning, and I was all excited and passionate about it and wanted to film on it because I'm sure there are probably other people out there, maybe you, who could also use this encouragement. And so bear with me, hopefully this goes smoothly, but we're along for the ride. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. I make Christian faith and lifestyle content, and we're just gonna go ahead and get into it. This is Psalm 127, and I'm gonna be reading verses 1 through 2, but honestly, the entire chapter, all of it's good, the whole Bible's good. Yeah, again, it's on the idea of work, and I think that when you are working towards something that you're really passionate about, maybe a goal you have, even something maybe that God has called you to, it can be really easy to just become consumed with that and feeling like you need to make it happen on your own. And I love this verse because it's a reminder that that is not true. And so before I unpack it more, let me actually read the passage to you. If you want to read along, you can pull out your Bible to Psalm 127. Otherwise, I'll have it up on the screen. But here's what it says. It says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and that you go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep." I love that passage. I love that verse. I want to unpack it a little bit. Like I said, I think oftentimes when you have a goal or something you're working towards, something you're passionate about, something that God has called you to reiterate everything I just said, it can feel like it's on you to make it happen, and you're just working and hustling and going for it and feeling like you're the one who needs to make it happen. But I love this verse because it's a reminder that that is not true, that anything we are working towards, the things that God is calling us to, ultimately, he is the one who is making those happen. No matter how hard we hustle, no matter how much hard work we put into things, we have to recognize that it is not by our own efforts that those things come to pass. It is by the Lord. It says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. We can be laboring as hard as we can, putting in as much work as we can, but unless God is ultimately the one who is building the house, then we are laboring in vain. And I think the first thing that verse brings is a sense of relief in realizing that we don't need to make things happen on our own. I feel like God has brought my attention to this verse so many times throughout different things I've been working on in my life, and just reminding me like, hey, if I have called you to this thing, Casey, don't feel like all of a sudden now you're the one who needs to go and make it happen on your own. Because if I've called you to it, if I've given you a vision to build this house, so to speak, then I'm the one who's actually building it. But also it does require your participation. And there's been so many times in my life that God has just blown me away in, again, if there's something that I'm working toward and feeling like I need to make happen, he's blown me away in maybe the connections he's made that I could have never made on my own or even thought to make on my own, or in just bringing about different support or help for accomplishing the thing that he has asked me to do, that has reminded me like, wow, how prideful and how small-minded of me to think that I needed to make this happen on my own, because this is is such a clear reminder to me that God is the one who is doing that. An example of this is a project I've been working on for a handful of years now. I've referenced it here and there in videos, but it was something that I was getting so discouraged on because I felt like I just couldn't make the time to really make significant progress on it. And it also felt a little overwhelming and intimidating because it's something I'd never done before. And so I feel like I just kept getting stuck and discouraged because it's something that I am very certain that God has called me to do, but I just felt like I wasn't able to make it happen. And then out of nowhere, a friend of mine actually made a connection with me with another person who's going to be able to help me with some of this stuff that I'm not really as good at or equipped to do, in just guiding me along that process. And I know that's big, and I will be sharing more later, but it was just a reminder that I think I need to make this happen, but this connection was made out of nowhere. Also, when we got here to Idaho, which I'm still here, we're visiting a family, but the second we landed in Boise, I saw that this person who I had been connected with, who I've had now a few phone conversations with, that she had been previously living in Oregon, but the second we landed in Boise, I opened my phone because we were still taxiing on the plane, waiting to get off the plane, and I opened Instagram, and the very first post I saw was a post from this person saying that she had actually just moved to Idaho, to about 10 minutes from where my family lives. And so I reached out to her and I was like, hey, I would love to, finally meet you in person, because we've had all these phone conversations, and we had this amazing time getting brunch, just getting to know each other more and really just catch up on all things and talk about this project. And so it was just this, again, continual affirmation and reminder that God is saying, like, you feel overwhelmed and like the weight of the world is on you to make this thing happen, and you feel like you're behind and that you're not achieving in all of these ways, but ultimately I am the one who is guiding along this project, bringing you the different pieces you need and the different people you need who are going to help to see it through. And it is happening in my timing and in my way, because it is my thing that I ultimately want to make happen through you. And again, that's just a small example, but it's a reminder that God is the one building the house. He is the one making it happen. And so I think the first thing that this verse and this passage brings is a sense of relief in reminding us that God is the one who is doing it. He is the one who is accomplishing the work. And I think the other thing that it really makes me think about is, am I working God's way? Meaning that if He is the one who is building the house, as I am setting out to labor to build that house and to put in the work, am I doing things God's way? And I think the very clear example it gives us here is in verse 2, when it says, "It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for He gives to His beloved sleep." And I know there have been several times in my life, again, when I'm working towards something and feeling like I need to make something happen, where I feel like I'm just hustling and I gotta go and I make things happen. And there's this temptation to kind of let that become a priority and to say, you know what, well, I need to do, or I wanna do a quiet time this morning, but I have all these things that I need to do. And so I'm gonna cut it short, or maybe even skip over it, or let my heart not really engage because you're anxiously trying to think about getting ahead to the next thing on your to-do list. I am so guilty of that all the time, but it's this reminder of, am I working God's way in the sense of, am I just trying to make it happen on my own, or am I letting everything I do flow from that place of overflow, of spending time with God myself and letting Him direct each of my steps, letting Him guide me in everything that I do, and not sacrificing what's most important, which is communion with Him, over trying to achieve and getting things done. And the other part of that is having a Sabbath, like God's way tells us that we work for the 6 days and then we have a day of rest, which reminds our hearts and souls that we are not in control, that we are not ultimately producing the fruits of our labor, that yes, God calls us to work, but He is bringing the harvest, and He's implemented this rhythm for us of working and then resting that really is going to be for our good, for our best, because He designed us and He knows that our bodies, our minds, our souls need that, and that our work is actually going to be better if we are willing to step away from it for one day of the week and trust Him with it, trust that He is going to provide, that we are not sustaining the universe on our own. And so that kind of just makes me think about, am I doing it God's way? He's called me to these certain rhythms of work and rest. And so am I adhering to those because I trust that He's going to provide, I trust that He's going to build the house? Or am I anxiously toiling, neglecting the quiet times, neglecting sleep, maybe neglecting these rhythms of rest because I think I need to make it happen on my own? Because the reality is I don't. He is the one who is building the house. And the third kind of question, heart check question, that this made me ask myself as I read this verse is, it says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And if God is the one who is ultimately building the house, then it is his house. It is his vision for the house. And so this makes me ask the question of, is it God's house, the vision of God's house that I'm truly seeking to build? Or are there times and moments where it is my house that I am getting caught up in wanting to build, and my vision for my life, the things that I hope happen in my life, the things that I would love to happen, right? Because this verse doesn't say that, God is going to just build our house, that we're going to come up with our blueprints for our life and what we would like it to look like and hand it over to God and that he's going to build it. No, it says that he is the one who builds the house, but we are his laborers who are putting in that work day after day. And so when we are kind of running up against walls, or maybe things aren't happening in the ways that we are wanting them to happen, I think that is a chance for us to stop and pause and ask ourselves the question, is this truly what God is wanting me to build? And, are there ways that I kind of get caught up on my own desires along the way? I need to constantly, every day, realign myself with what he has called me to do, and realizing that that may or may not include some of the things that I want to happen, but ultimately it is about building his kingdom, making him known, and it is for his glory, and it is what he wants in his house. And so those are just some thoughts on that. One other thing I wanted to mention is, I kind of referenced it before, but it says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. This means that, again, God is the one building it, but we still have a responsibility to put in the work. This isn't, to say that this isn't just to kind of abdicate us from any sense of work or responsibility. Rather, this calls us to a responsibility of working hard, stewarding the call that he's given us well, of working hard, of, doing it to the best of our ability, to the glory of God, because we are called, whether we eat or drink or whatever we do, to do it to the glory of God. And so this isn't a call to just be lazy and to not work. It is a call to work well, but to ultimately recognize that unless that work is submitted to God, unless we're recognizing that he is the one that ultimately is making things happen, then our work is in vain. I hope that that all makes sense and that encourages you, hopefully in the way that it encouraged me too, and just spoke into whatever situation you might be facing as well. To remember that whatever God has called you to, he has not left you alone in it. It is not up to you. The weight of the world is not up to you to make the things happen that he has called you to, but rather he is the one building the house, and you are the faithful servant who is putting in that day-to-day work, brick by brick building of what he has called you to do. But he is in control. He will sustain it. He will bring it to the finish line, because he's the one who ultimately started it and called you to it to begin with. And so I hope that you found that encouraging. If you did, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and I would love to hear your thoughts down below on this topic. And if there's any sort of prayer requests you have within this realm of things you're working toward, and ways maybe you need to be reminded that God is ultimately the one who is working through your work to accomplish his purposes in your life. And so, yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.